Welcome back to another episode of Dental Marketing Theory. I'm your host, Gary Bird. I'm the founder of SMC National, where we help you create, convert, and close more new patients so you can grow the way that you want. But you can't grow if your patients don't understand their dental insurance and think it should be covering all of their expenses when it comes to dental. Today, I have Shawn Peers, who's the president of Dental Peers, and he works not only in Canada, but he also works in the States, and he's going to be breaking down the biggest struggles that he sees in dental offices across the board in both areas. And he's also going to give us several comparisons of the Canadian market versus the US market. This has been really, really educational for me, and I trust you're going to learn a lot from this. Stay tuned.
You could make a good living, and dentists in Canada made a good living just basically telling patients, don't worry, your insurance will cover it. So they never really learned to talk to dentists about valuing the service itself. It was just insurance will cover it. Now they're facing this situation where insurance isn't covering it, and they don't have the verbal tools and skills to be able to say, this is what you need to do.
Guys, if you don't explain this correctly to the client, you're going to be the bad guy, not Facebook. They're going to blame you. It's going to be your fault. So you have to be very detailed and particular with your words. Otherwise, dentists get really mad at us, the marketing company. Like, are you guys incompetent? What's going on?
I learned this through some of the folks in the States, actually, when I asked, why aren't you up here? Patients up here can't afford $60,000 implant programs out of pocket. Why don't you guys have a presence up here? And the response was always, we would love to, but your regulations require us to work through one of your banks.
All right, we are live, and I'm excited about this one because I've had a lot of conversations with Shawn online through DMs and on social media. He's all over the place on there, and today I get the opportunity to talk to him. So, Shawn, I would love to start off with, tell us how you got into the dental industry.
I think I was kind of born into it, actually, Gary. My mom basically was, pretty much from the time I was in the womb, she's been working in dentistry. She started as a dental assistant in the Canadian military and then got into the private world, started working in the business side of things. When I went up, I went through law school. I am a recovering lawyer, and I did a lot of work. Awesome. Yeah, I did a lot of work actually in the dental world. It's kind of funny. I was a law student at the time back, when the whole world of AIDS was kind of coming out and the dental community didn't really know how to deal with that. And one of the offices that I knew through my mom's network was they had a human rights complaint. And it was based on the fact that they treated this particular person, but they did it at the end of the day and they covered everything with plastics. Like they just treated them differently. So they filed a complaint. And I wound up putting together a settlement agreement for it, which the Royal College of Dental Surgeons then wound up using as their precedent model. So I was always around it, giving legal advice, did that for 14 years. And then I decided, as much as I like a good fight when you really need to have one, the legal system pulls you apart before it puts you back together. And that to me was frustrating because I just felt there were simpler solutions. So I got frustrated, went out, got my MBA and kind of circled back. My mom had sort of started this, I guess you would say in the States, a GPO by accident back in the 80s. And so I started taking that over and working with her to learn more about coaching and learn more about the business of dentistry. And I'm at the point now where I'm operating this buying group still, but I'm also doing a little bit of what I sort of look at and say, doctors, it's a different world now. 2024 business model or business environment. You got to stop working in a 1990s business model.
Yeah, it doesn't work anymore.
And so I'm looking at it saying, you got to start thinking like what a CEO does. So I do some coaching with dentists to start learning about a CEO style approach to their business model.
Got it. Okay. And so just for the audience, so you run a organization that helps dental practices buy materials and other things at a discounted rate by pulling together, which is really smart. It's basically what a big DSO does, right? Or any business. I just did a video recently on Starbucks and I went over like how much does it cost Starbucks to buy a cup and the coffee, and it's way lower than a single coffee shop because they're buying in bulk, massive bulk. And so you're helping practices lower that cost, but inside of that, you're also doing some coaching around how to change the mindset. And that's mainly in Canada, right? You're working mainly with dentists in Canada, is that right?
Well, the buying group is in Canada. I can do the coaching side of things in Canada or the US. because that's not restricted. I don't need that part, to have the relationships, but my vendor relationships from the GPO buying group side of things, that's up here in Canada. And I think, people in private practice in the States are well served with GPOs and buying groups, and I would certainly encourage them to take a look.
You've probably noticed this before, but this podcast is unsponsored. What that means is we don't get paid to do it, but we want to bring you the best information possible. So how do we make sure that this content stays on the air? We need you to like and subscribe. Wherever you're at, whatever you're listening on, just give us a thumbs up or subscribe, and that helps us out so much. I know that you probably haven't done it, so I'm just going to sit here and wait until you do. 95% of our listeners have not subscribed to our podcast. So go ahead and do it now. Don't make this awkward. All right, good. Back to the show. Yeah, because you save a lot of money. I mean, you save a ton of money when if you're just out there buying your own stuff and working your own deals. Like you have no leverage basically now. Now, so tell me a little bit about the differences between Canada and the U.S. when it comes to dentistry. You're kind of working in one foot in both markets. What would you say the biggest?
I think the biggest difference up to now anyway has certainly been the insurance model. I can remember back, I don't remember how many years ago now when we started hearing about this PPO model going on and developing in the States, and people were explaining it up here to dentists in Canada, and the dentists kind of, they didn't like the sound of it right from the get-go. So our insurance has never gone down that route where the insurance company effectively sets the payment scale. So, instead what's wound up happening is all the different provinces have they're kind of self-regulated through their provincial associations, and they have provincial fee guides. Now, you don't have to charge bang on the fee guides. Some people will be less. Some people will be a bit more. I would say it probably creates a little bit of stickiness in price, right? You're probably not going to wind up going 25% above fee guide, because patients find out, they're going to kind of freak out and say, what the heck's going on here? Yeah. You're 10%, maybe you can justify that. So we create a little bit of price stickiness that way. Whereas, most of the jurisdictions that I'm familiar with in the States, the dentists are, if they're not in network, they're free to set their rates. And it's kind of what the market will bear for them, I guess. That to me is certainly one of the big differences. It has a challenge though, because, you go back, these private employer-based insurance benefit programs that have been in existence since, I don't know, late 70s, early 80s, they've not seen an increase in their maximum payouts. Right. I mean, it's basically, I've had the odd one where maybe now they'll cap out.
Canada hasn't increased, and payouts in America have actually decreased. Is that right?
From what I've heard on the PPO side of things, the payouts in the States has been facing a lot of downward pressure from my friends. In our case, it's just a benefit, right? It's purely, you get up to $1,500 a year that will go towards your insurance.
Basically, right?
Yeah. And the downside of that is dentists have historically relied upon that. You go back pre-implant days, that was pretty good money. You could make a good living, and dentists in Canada made a good living just basically telling patients, don't worry, your insurance will cover it. So they never really learned to talk to dentists about valuing the service itself. It was just insurance will cover.
Yeah.
Now they're facing this situation where insurance isn't covering it, and they don't have the verbal tools and skills to be able to say, this is what you need to do.
Yeah. And this is the States kind of went through this about 5 years, 10 years before you, where kind of the same thing happened, right? Where it was like, hey, yeah, the insurance will cover it. And then the States have been dealing with this for some time, and now Canada's going through the same thing. And the thing that's interesting right now, too, is that at the same time, you're also facing cost of goods through the roof, labor cost through the roof, right? And I'm sure it's in Canada, it's the same thing as the States, right? The labor costs are going up. And then you have all this going on with the insurance. And then patients are buying less now, too, because patients are feeling the squeeze on everything, right? Dentistry just didn't go up in cost, but everything went up in cost. And then there's also, at the same time, I think, and dentists are starting to learn this in the States now, is that there's a huge gap between the perception of value with dental and what the actual dental costs. So if you go to a patient and say, hey, how much do you think a crown is? It's going to be 20% of what the actual cost is, because they just don't. They don't know. It's very similar to when your car breaks down and how much you think your car should be to repair it, right? Because you kind of base it off of like, okay, well, I paid $40,000 for this car. I bumped the bumper. Should be an easy fix. And it's like, nope, that's a $5,000 fix. People are like, oh, what? That's so much money. So what are you doing to like kind of help, or what are you telling dentists as you help them around this? Because that's a very complicated mix of business problems.
Well, I mean, the first thing to do right up front is to really make sure that you're putting the health forward as being the number one priority. And you're telling them, look, we're here to treat you in terms of your oral health care and medical condition. We're not here to treat your insurance company. Your insurance company, they're people making these decisions. They're just looking at ways to try to keep their bottom line as tight as possible. And in fact, we try to change the vocabulary and say, and not use terminology like insurance, because people have this mindset when they hear insurance that it's going to cover the full tab. Yeah, so we try to say, oh, wow, you're really fortunate that your employer gives you this benefit that helps cover some of the costs of your dental work. And you're just subtly trying to massage the conversation in a little bit of a different direction and realize that, this is an investment in themselves as well. It's an investment in their care, their health, and great that you can have a little bit of contribution from your employer for that, but you gotta, at the end of the day, you gotta pony up a little bit.
Yeah, it's not going to solve the whole problem. There's a couple other frameworks that I love to use, and one of them is dental related, and the other one is something that we use inside of our company. And so the first one that's dental related is explaining to people, helping them understand that dental insurance isn't like your other insurance, right? So Shawn, if you get in a car accident today and you total your car, what's your insurance going to do? It's going to replace it. If your house burns down tomorrow, God forbid, they're going to replace it. They're going to build up the house and fix it. And they're even going to put you in a hotel or another house while you wait for your house to be repaired, right? Like, that's insurance. That's what we all think. All your patients, or not all, but a lot of them, that's what they think they have in their dental insurance. If my teeth all fall out tomorrow, they're going to put my teeth all back in. Wrong. That's not what's going to happen. And that's not what they're going to do. And so explaining that to the patient really, really helps them. The other thing, and I would love your thoughts on this one, because this one is a little bit, it hits a little bit differently because of the way I use it. We use it inside of our company. So something that I teach all of our team is that somebody's always going to be the bad guy, right? So like, I'll give a story here. When we go to set up someone's Google My Business, or we go to set up someone's Facebook page, or we have to like set up ads on it or whatever it is, there's always something that Facebook's going to do and make it hard. Sometimes it's easy, but sometimes it's really, really complicated and really hard. And what I always have to remind my team is guys, if you don't explain this correctly to the client, you're going to be the bad guy, not Facebook. They're going to blame you. It's going to be your fault. And so you have to be very detailed and particular with your words, and explaining that, look, Facebook is a pain rear. They always do this. And when it happens, it's really hard, but we're going to work you through this and we're going to get through this together. But don't worry, we're doing all the hard work. It just might take a little bit longer. And we have to explain it that way. Otherwise, dentists get really mad at us, the marketing company, like, are you guys incompetent? What's going on? And I feel like insurance is the same way in dental, where if you don't take the time to explain what's going on, you end up as the bad guy, as the dental office, and you have to kind of turn the tables and make the insurance the bad guy. And you did that in a very nice way, right? You were like, hey, that's nice. That's cute that they're contributing towards this, but there's some other things we have to work through. Does that framework kind of make sense for dental, or how do you see that?
Oh, 100%. I think that's really the approach that we try to get dentists and their teams to go down. And it's, it's unfortunate. It's not really where much of the education lies, obviously. Hey, I don't want an incompetent dentist. I want my dental team to be as clinically skilled as possible. But they still have to be able to express themselves in a way that the patients are understanding what's going on. And, you have to inform before you perform. And that becomes a challenge sometimes, is just this assumption that everybody makes, that we're just going to go ahead and whatever happens is going to happen. And, I've seen dentists having to eat some bills because they didn't have that conversation beforehand. Insurance didn't step in. And the patient is saying, well, I wouldn't have gotten that done. I that's not in my budget. I wouldn't have done that. So it's all about keeping those lines of communication as open as possible, and just being very frank. And as I said, I try not to vilify anyone to the extent possible. Sometimes you have to. Sometimes you do have to step in and say, look, the people that are not approving this treatment for you, they don't know dentistry. They just know how to keep their expenses down. So sometimes you have to do that a little bit. But if I can at the front, prepare them as well as possible by saying, your employer's done a great job for you to look out for you and provide you with this benefit that you can take advantage of, but it is a benefit. It doesn't cover the whole cost. And our commitment is to you and to your oral health. And this is the recommendation that we make for your treatment based on what we're observing from your oral health condition today.
That's awesome. Well done. I noticed one of the other differences between the States and Canada is that Canada doesn't have any finance options, or it's a lot lacking. So in the States, there's tons of patient financing options. Doctors still aren't on board with using them, but I think they're going to get on board with using them because they're just going to figure out like, man, I got to get on board with this if I want to continue to grow and actually make money. Because patients just can't afford dentistry. On the flip side, I've noticed in Canada, there's not as many options for patient financing. Could you kind of break down the difference between the two markets when it comes to that category?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it comes down from that historical context, right? When once upon a time, $1,500 a year of insurance coverage was going to be more than enough to cover just about everybody's needs. Financing just wasn't needed. Now, as the technology has evolved and we've started to introduce new treatment opportunities with implants and all these other sorts of things, and even the technology we use to work with that through cone beam and all this things that are adding so much more to the costs, dentistry has certainly increased in cost. And we are seeing some of the some financing options being made available. The challenge, of course, is what I've learned, and I learned this through some of the folks in the States, actually, when I asked, why aren't you up here? We could, patients up here can't afford $60,000 implant programs just, out of pocket automatically. Why don't you guys have a presence up here? And the response was always, we would love to, but your regulations require us to work through one of your banks. And that means now they're going to have to wind up splitting, the profits. And let's face it, it is a business. People do and should expect to be able to make some money off of it. So now it becomes less of an attractive option. So there certainly are some up here, but they're, as far as I know, any of the ones I've encountered are uniquely Canadian. I don't know of any American ones that have chosen to cross the border. Some maybe have, and they just haven't come across my radar. But I'm told by the American ones that I've spoken to that it's just not worth the headache because they've got to deal with the Canadian banks.
Wow. Is there any other big differences that you've seen between Canada and the U.S. and anything else you could share with the audience on that front?
Well, I mean, the biggest difference now is one that's just kind of coming down the pipes, and that's the new federal government dental plan. And that's just kind of starting to roll out. So we're still not 100% sure how that will play out in all fronts. It's not going to cover every potential treatment option. You won't have, as I said, full mouth reconstruction with implants and all that kind of stuff available. I believe there will be crowns and everything, but at its starting point, what we're told is the new plan will cover a maximum of 70% of the cost. So, most of the dentists I've spoken to are choosing not to opt into it, but I do know some that are. Like, we're seeing online advertisements from some of the dentists, particularly if they're in communities where that's going to be a big deal, where they're saying, we're signed up, we're ready to go. Obviously, my concern is, I think right now, when it's the newest program available, it's as good as it's going to be. And as costs rise and it becomes more and more expensive to do dentistry next year, I don't expect that we'll see those fees increase. And, my concern long term is,
can you leave the program after you're in it, or is it kind of you're in and then you're locked in?
I think you'll be able to leave it if you choose to. I think it's, I could stand to be corrected on that. I haven't looked that closely at it. I just know a lot of dentists are saying right off the bat, no, they're not going to do it because that's the way they feel. They don't feel it will be something that will allow them to be fairly compensated for the work that the patients are going to need, and it won't allow them to do the work that they feel is in the patient's best interest.
Got it. Awesome. Well, this has been really, really good. If someone wants to reach out to you and talk through some of this stuff with you, whether they're in the Canada market and they want to get lower prices, or if they're in the States or Canada and they want to talk through how to make sure that their patients know how to actually have a conversation around insurance, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Just reach out to me at Shawn, SHAWN, at dentalpeers.ca. That's my email address. I'd be happy to have any conversation. If we want, we can arrange a Zoom chat from there, but that's probably the easiest way.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.